Okay, right. So this reading about Noah's Ark is the truth, or what they say is the truth behind the biblical story. And it is, in fact, an explanation for what happened to our last civilization, which was the civilization which we refer to as Atlantis and the Lemurians. They weren't just in Santorini, they were everywhere. So they're saying that they also were subjected to some terrible forces, which we are being subjected to now, and turned very much to materialism and greed in all ways, and started to turn against the whole way that civilization is supposed to be. They also turned very much to black magic and to sexual deviation. All those things are being pushed on us now. Most of us think it's absolutely appalling, but it's very upsetting for our children. And we have to fight back against it in all ways, because otherwise we will go the same way. Right, I'll start reading it. So this is Noah's Ark, 17th of December, 1975. The story of Noah's Ark is another legend included in the Christian Bible for a very important reason. Noah was a mythical character who did not exist exactly as he is recorded in the Bible. He represents the many who, like him, knew for as long as 100 years before disaster struck the world that, judging by all the portents in the skies, the deterioration of the world's weather, the collapse of human society, the increase in wars, violence and pestilence of all kinds, that the end must come. The message recorded in the Bible that was reputed to have been given to Noah was given to many at that time. They were in despair at the sad state of affairs that existed, a state of affairs which is beginning in your world just as it did before. When the warning was given to the previous members of this humanity as the world's weather began to deteriorate, all manner of beautiful flowers, fruit, trees, shrubs, birds and insects began to disappear from this planet, simply because there was no longer the climatic conditions to support them. There were those in the world who did not have deep knowledge as to what must be done to save their beautiful world. This was, as now, to stop indiscriminate building of both huge dams for electric power, vast highways and townships in areas where forests have been uprooted without the slightest concern as to why the forests were grown there in the first place, and general desecration of the world's surface. These deep-thinking people did everything in their power to plead with the governments and the people in power, but to no avail, and were only most often jeered at, derided, or just ignored. These were the people who then set about building boats, hoping to save their families when the floods came. They knew that they might have to live in them without food for as long as even a year or longer. They were, of course, laughed at and scorned, but those who refused to believe that there could be any disaster, by those who believed that there could be any disaster in the offing. In the physical world, 100 years is a long time, long enough to have put the world as it was back into some sort of order, but nothing happened. So after a time, many lost faith, discontinued their boat building, and ceased to remember their warnings. Only the steadfast believers kept their boats and stocked them with animals, not only that they might continue and procreate, but also that they might have food for the long period of siege. When the rains came at last, those who were prepared had to ignore the desperate pleas for help from those who had previously scorned them, and had to witness the horrible way in which they perished, mostly in small groups without food or shelter. Those who had prepared knew that they must head for the mountainous regions, as only there would they hopefully find any kind of sanctuary. Some never found these mountainous regions and died of starvation in their boats. Others found them but died of cold and the desolation of the wilderness in which they found themselves. After the rains came, intense cold followed, in which many more perished, until there were only a few members of humanity left in this world. These few survivors eked out a bare, terrible and monotonous existence for many centuries until the world regained some kind of order and human history began to emerge once more. By the time this history began again, no one could remember the beautiful world that once there had been, the Garden of Eden given in creation's bounty for its people. The previous members of this humanity, who had come to civilization in just marginally longer a time than this present civilization, never learnt to create flying machines. They did discover the use of electricity, solar heat and its power, the separation of water for the purpose of motivating energy, and developed engines only just a little less clumsy than those of this humanity. But they never did discover, as neither has this civilization, the full exploitation of the gyroscope, which is the only correct principle for the kind of power necessary for space travel. Real power can only be achieved with a combination of the two principles, the separation of water and the gyroscope principle. The present piston engine used in the average motor car has been brought to the limit of its power. It could never compete with the true power of the gyroscope. The spaceships designed by present-day designers could never travel far into space, as they are designed on quite the wrong principles. Some of the knowledge gained in the use of the jet engine will be of great value, combined with the knowledge which it is hoped that intelligent engineers of the future will discover with their experiments with the simple gyroscope. Those who speak with excitement of sighting a spacecraft, some of which are perfectly genuine, though often disbelieved, never stop to consider how such a craft could travel the distance between this planet and others far off, without carrying an enormous amount of fuel. They simply never think of water, which is available in all planets similar to this one. The previous members of this humanity made great use of wood in the construction of their buildings, furniture and ornaments and articles of jewellery and all manner of other things. In doing so, they uprooted and destroyed whole areas of forest land without any attempt to replant or return to the earth what they had used. So it is that areas such as the Sahara and the Gobi Desert were once covered in beautiful forests made up of trees long since exterminated, trees which could only grow in those areas. The loss of these special trees has a great effect on the world's weather, and if it were possible to re-establish those forests, changes would begin to be apparent even today in the weather of this planet. They also made great use of glass and glass fibres, which much more than does this civilization, making use of it in textiles and other materials, furniture, and even their vehicles and motivated craft. They did create a vehicle similar to that which we would call a hovercraft today, but much more powerful and larger in size, and in these they travelled long distances and transported their goods. They constructed very beautiful buildings of all kinds, including churches, for they too had their prophets sent to them and practised some form of religion. They never discovered any useful oil, which to them seemed simply a useless black mud. If they had, they would have exploited us in much the same way as this generation of this humanity, that spares no thought for the terrible pollution that burning of such gases causes, and the loss to later generations when this valuable substance, which has many other properties not yet exploited, has been all burned up, never to be replaced. The cancer sickness, now becoming more and more evident in this world, and many other ills, is really so often nothing more than the effect of pollution, both in the atmosphere, the food that it is eaten, which affects the air that is breathed by mankind, animals, plants, and everything that is living on this earth. It can only increase unless all nations band themselves together, not in war, dissension, and argument, but for the benefit of all. Creation's bounty is great if mankind will only avail himself of it and learn, as other planets have done, the folly of violence, destruction and war, to learn to conserve beauty, to love not only each other but the beautiful environment this earth could offer. This is my comment. In various programs that talk about Atlantis and where it was, I think they are proving it was not small groups of people confined to the island of Santorini, but was in fact our previous civilization. It was said that they turned very much to materialism and greed, and also to the practice of black magic and sexual deviation. What is being forced on our population at this present time? Exactly that. endless ways of gambling your money away, or ways to learn to win large sums by getting involved in preposterous lotteries of all sorts. Our children are being brainwashed about their sexuality and told about sex when they are far too young to understand. And many of our pop stars are now appearing in outlandish demonic costume and trumpeting their sexual ambivalence. To most of it, it's pathetic and distasteful, but to our children, it's very disturbing. And in view of the fact that the sexual act reinforces or weakens the human spirit, it is doubly disturbing. It's said that around 15,000 years ago, a group of Aryans walked into the northern India. I believe that it is more likely 15,000 years ago, and that these were the remnants of the civilization that made up Atlantis and the Lemurians. Sanskrit, although a dead language and only spoken by high-caste Brahmin peoples, and is believed to have European roots, and is based on the languages spoken by European-type people who made up the last civilization on this planet. If we did but know it, many of us may well have lived as part of Atlantis or Lemuria. Sadly, when a civilization is lost and life is left to start again on a planet, then most of the records of that civilization are destroyed. And we stand on the brink of that now, so let us hope that we can all do something better. I'm sure there are other people other than myself reading out these little messages who are working to try and save this planet. Let's hope. Right, Miles, that's it.